Hi everyone, Jessica here from Paper Ink Stamp. Today's video we're going to be taking a look at the newest issue of Creative Stampin', and that's issue 86. So let's look at the free gifts to begin with. So we have a stamp and die for this Kingfisher, and then we've got this really big A4 by the water stamp set. And this is filled with lots of scene building stamps, plus a whole bunch of sentiments, which would be perfect for masculine cards. You can see you've got a Father's Day, sort of be able to make retirement cards. So lots of sort of versatility within this month's free gift. So let's take a look inside the magazine. So we always just go through and just have a look at some of the inspiration within this magazine for the free gifts. So you can see here they are using sort of frames and that they've cut out from the images just to kind of highlight those sort of central images. Here you've got some sort of really great ink blending, so I really love doing the strips of colour, so that will work perfectly with this set. You see here you can subscribe to this magazine, and they offer a free gift of the Nuvo Aqua Flow pens, so that's perfect if you want to subscribe. Again, we've got just a couple of different sort of concept cards. So you've got that really fun sort of t-shirt down there, and of course a box card as well. So lots of images to be able to make a box card. They've got examples of colouring in using watercolours. So again, a really big variety of different kinds of cards you can make with this particular set. You can see here next month's free gift is this sort of autumn themed Wild and Free, and I'm pretty sure that matches in with the Simply Cards and Papercraft next issue as well. So we'll be able to see if we can maybe merge those two stamp sets together. But now let's take a look at creating a card using this By the Water stamp set. For today's card, I'm going to be creating an easel card. So I've taken a pre-made blank card base, and on the front panel I've scored this in half. So I've scored it at 2.5 inch, and I'm just folding it over. This will then be our sort of card base, and then we're going to add an extra panel on top of this flap, and that is going to create our easel card. So super easy card base to make. If you don't have pre-made card bases, obviously it's super easy to be able to create this yourself. So what we're going to do is I've taken another sheet. Like I said, this is again 5 by 7 inch, but I'm just going to be building a scene, a really simple scene onto this using my stamping platform. So you can see there the first stamp that I've put down is our Fisherman with the fishing rod, and I'm stamping this in Memento Tuxedo black ink. And I'm using my stamping platform just in case I need to restamp any of these images. The next stamp I'm going to be stamping is this float, and it's got some really nice details within this stamp set. So this particular stamp has got those sort of water ripples around it as well, so it gives it that motion, and it just sort of makes it look a little bit more realistic. The next stamp I'm going to be using is this kind of foreground reed. So this is quite a big stamp, and sort of the stamps are in proportion to each other, so you really could easily build that scene and have obviously smaller images in the back like our Fisherman, and then have an image like this at the front that's a lot bigger. Like I said, just gives your card a little bit more perspective. I'm also adding some stones to the bottom left-hand corner just to sort of add a little bit of detail there, so it's not sort of a big blank space. The next stamp that I'm going to be using is the really nice sort of background trees and bank stamp, but I don't want the whole image. So to make sure that you don't accidentally get a section in that you don't want, you could mask that piece off, ink up your stamp, and then take the mask back off again. But I have just carefully sort of inked up to that sort of tapered part of the image. I have also overlapped, coming off the card, my stamp, just so it kind of fits in a little bit nicer, as if there is obviously sort of the scene is coming off the page. So you will notice there are some kind of blank spaces. Hopefully once the card is finished, it's going to look a lot better, but there is a reason that I have kind of stamped this way, which we will be looking at a little bit later in the video. So here is our finished stamped background, and what I'm going to do now is just use some Distress Oxide. This is tumbled glass, and I'm going to be using this just to sort of fill in the water. So I don't usually use this kind of dauber sponge thing. I usually use my blending brushes. I just find that I don't get sort of a smooth finish as well as I'd like. Unfortunately, I've just had to wash my brush, so I've had to bring one of these out. So I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to kind of get the water in. I didn't want to have to sort of mask or create doubles of these images or anything like that. So I have sort of gone as carefully as I can, but I also wanted to get just a little bit of texture on there as well. So you can see that some of them are heavier areas than others, but I have kind of gone in a sort of side to side motion when I was blending this, just because I wanted to have that kind of that sort of water effect. And I am reasonably happy with the finished result. There are, like I said, just a couple of sort of blank spaces in there. I could have added a few more images, but I didn't want to kind of overwhelm the image. So just to add a little bit of colour to this scene, I am just using my Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend markers. I'm really just doing some really basic colouring in here. So you can see that I've just added a little bit of colour on the reeds. I've coloured in those stones, and now I'm just sort of doing some really rough colouring for these trees. I'm not, like I said, not worried about getting any perfect blends or anything like that. Just getting a little bit of colour down on this scene. The last thing we've got to colour in is, of course, our fisherman, and again, really basic colouring in here. You can also see to the right that I've stamped a couple of images again. So I've re-stamped that float and just the rocks and a couple of individual rocks as well. And you can also see I've stamped another one of the fishermen, but I've not coloured it in. And I've done this for a very particular reason. Again, we'll come to that just a little bit later in the video. But for now, I'm just going to fussy cut these images out, and these are going to just build up our scene just a little bit more. What I really wanted to do was create a really interesting easel card. And when I seen the fisherman with the fishing rod, I immediately thought about doing an easel card, but having that image as like the edge of the card. So this is what I've done here with that particular stamp of the fisherman, and then with these trees as well. So you can see I'm just fussy cutting sort of around these images, and this is then going to be the top of our easel card. So this is going to come off the card itself and kind of floating above. So pretty much like those edgeable dies that you can get, that's the kind of look that I'm going for here. So all I'm doing is just cutting around it. So you can see that I've cut my fishing rod as well. I want to make sure that I keep that in there, and that's just going to kind of be floating around really. So I really loved the idea of this, and I think it works really well. So for the next part of the card, what I did was just put down those extra rocks, and I've just trimmed off the bottom of our panel slightly. And what I'm going to do now is get just some regular cotton thread, and I'm actually going to create a line going from our fishing rod, and I'm going to attach it onto the very sort of edge of the line of the float. So obviously if you're just stamping this down, you could just draw a line, but I really wanted to have a little bit of an interactive, something a little bit fun on it, so I'm using just a piece of thread. So all I'm doing is just putting some liquid glue just over the stamped image, so over the kind of lined part of the image. You don't really need to be this sort of precise with it, but I've chosen to be. And I'm just going to glue this section down. But the reason then why I've stamped another of those float stamps and coloured and cut it is then I'm going to be putting this over the top. But I wanted to make sure that this thread didn't go anywhere. Then I'm going to turn my panel over, and I'm just going to pop some glue onto the fishing rod on the back of the image. And again, the reason why I've then re-stamped our fisherman image and not bothered to colour it in is because I'm going to be placing this on the back. But what I do actually end up doing, because the back looked a little bit messy, it wasn't really cut to the exact same size, and obviously you can see where I've used my alcohol markers. I do end up just sticking a panel onto the back of this, and then I actually just use a craft knife and just go back around the edge. So you can see how our panel is going to look. So you can see that I've added that additional float stamp on there, so the thread goes behind that, and again then the thread goes behind our fishing rod, so it makes it look super realistic. But what I'm going to do now is just put an acrylic block on top of this, and I'm just going to pop it to one side just to help that glue set. And what we're going to do is work on our sentiment for the inside of the card, and our sentiment is also going to be our easel stopper. So I've just taken some super light blue cardstock, so this is just regular cardstock, and I'm going to make this a get well soon card. So again, a perfect sentiment in here, lots of sort of sentiments that you can build together, and again, perfect for those sort of masculine cards as well. So what I'm going to do is stamp this again in that tuxedo black Memento ink pad, and I'm actually going to heat emboss this as well with some clear embossing powder just to help that stand out nicely. For the inside of the card, I've used some craft paper. I just thought that would go really nicely with our sort of a fishing scene. So I've just put this down as a layer, and then I'm going to be popping the sentiment into the bottom right hand corner. Like I said, that's then going to be our easel stopper. So I have popped those onto some foam pads. The other thing I'm going to do as well, just because I thought the sort of bottom of this card looked a little bit plain, and I wanted to use a couple more of the stamps in this particular set, so I decided to stamp some of the bird images. So using that same tuxedo black ink pad, you can see that I just put 3 of the birds just in this bottom left hand corner, and then I do end up stamping another sentiment in the middle of the card, so you wouldn't see it unless you opened the card itself, and I just use the thinking of you sentiment in there. So here you can see our finished inside of the card, and I think all of these stamps and these colours that we've used work perfectly together, and you can see here our finished panel. So the last thing to do is just assemble our card together. So I'm going to pop my adhesive on to our flap. So I'd recommend doing it this way because you know then you're not going to get any adhesive where you don't want it, and you can make sure that you get full coverage. So I'm just using this tape roll, and I'm just covering it. So this was the 2.5 inch sort of section that our panel is going to stick to. So once we've got that adhered, we can just make sure to press down nice to secure that onto our card, and then you can see our finished easel card here. So it's hopefully you'll be able to sort of see the design of it on camera, but you can see that we've got that really fantastic kind of edge to this card, and then we've got that realistic looking fishing line as well by using that thread. So I kind of thought it needed a little bit of something else, so I did stamp one of those birds again. I don't necessarily look at it now, I don't think it necessarily needed it. However, it's on there and it sort of still fits in really nicely, and you do have that additional stamp, which is just that sort of a half water ring, so you can make it look really realistic. So that's it for this video. I hope it's given you some inspiration on what you can do with this By the Waters stamp set from issue 86 of Simply Cards and Papercraft. Of course, there will be another video again with just some more inspiration on what you can do with this particular set. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. It really does help to support my channel. There are a couple of magazines that I do create videos on. So you've got this Creative Stamping, but also Simply Cards and Papercraft. I'm also potentially looking at subscribing to 2 other magazines, which is the Die Cutting Essentials and Paper Crafting Essentials. So let me know in the comment section down below if you do want to see videos on those. So I will look at subscribing to those as well. So thanks very much for watching and happy crafting.